everyone. Welcome to the 5-Beer Plan. I'm Brian, and this is the ongoing saga of an everyman's ale trail. In this episode, I reveal the pillars of my craft journey, start up the mash in the homebrew project, dig a little deeper into beer with Brit from Wyrd Sisters Taphouse and Brewing, and review Very Big Moose from Fierce Beer. But before we get this party started, here is this episode's burning question. What is your favorite barrel-aged stout? According to Untappd, mine is Utopia's barrel-aged worldwide stout, the 2021 variant from Dogfish Head in Milton, Delaware. This beer had been floating around in my fridge for the better part of 3 years. It is one of the rare 5-star ratings I've given a beer. Yep, pretty stingy, I know. A deep dark pour with a prominent barrel-aged nose. Dark chocolate notes on the palate with a roasty undercurrent. Smooth with a boozy finish. If you've ever had this beer, let me know what you think of it. In this segment of Tales from the Trail, I reveal the foundations of my craft beer journey. Every person who enjoys the craft has a unique beer origin story to tell. Though I've shared bits and pieces of mine over the last 4 seasons, I felt it was time to share a few that have shaped my story. And I'll be honest, the answer to this question has been sloshing around in my brain for quite some time. It was specifically planted there 5 years ago. This was in Season 3 of the Untappd podcast, when episode 31 was released. John and Harry, master podcasters and beer nerds extraordinaire, revealed the concept and the foundations of their respective Mount Beermore entries. Since you might not be familiar with Mount Rushmore, this is a national memorial located in South Dakota. And that's really what I mean when I say Mount Beermore. Mount Rushmore depicts 4 United States presidents who symbolize American growth, birth, preservation, and development. So the idea of the influence of a quartet isn't a new concept, but rather a slight variation on an old question. Even the park rangers at Mount Rushmore regularly ask visitors who they might have chosen for such immortalization on the mountain face. I know not everyone is into sports or may even follow certain regions. Growing up in Michigan, I've had a long-time passion for the sports teams that hail from the state. For example, someone might say to me, "What is your Mount Rushmore of Detroit Red Wings hockey players?" Essentially, who are the 4 players that best represent Hockey Town? For me, these 4 players might be Gordie Howe, Steve Yzerman, Sergei Fedorov, and Terry Sawchuk. A mix of old and new. But you might have a different idea. Maybe you would include Nick Lidstrom or Ted Lindsay. Anyway, you get the idea. As I reflect back on my craft beer journey, here are the 4 representatives that I came up with for my Mount Beermore. Well, it's really 5, but you'll see why in a moment. In no particular order, the Mount Beermore of the Everyman. The first brewery representing the first craft beer, I have Beck's Brewery, also known as Bowery Beck & Company. Beck's Light and Beck's Dark were my first 2 real gateway beers to craft back in the mid-90s. With those unique green bottles, which I talked about in Season 1, I really thought I was onto something. Beck's Light was a German light lager that was crushable, slightly sweet and aromatic. I had no idea at the time that it was still brewed according to Reinheitsgebot. When I could not find the beer in the local grocery store one day after work, I tried Beck's Dark, purely because of the brewery name. Again, I did not know it at the time, but this is technically a Schwartz beer. Smooth, roasty, and light-bodied, it was a nice change of pace, especially for the winter months. 30 years ago, these beers were still imported from Germany before the brewery was bought out and ultimately brewed in St. Louis starting in the early 2010s, and it was never the same. The second brewery, representing the gateway beer, I have Anchorage Brewing. I first heard about this brewery through Tavour about 9 years ago. For those that may not be aware, Tavour is what I believe to be the premier online beer store. They carry beers and styles from places I've never heard of before. Anchorage was one of those breweries. It was not distributed anywhere east of the Rockies, which made it even more appealing. Believe me, I looked high and low. So the very first beer I tasted from Anchorage was their Patterns Triple IPA, which I had gotten from Tavour. This beer was made entirely with Citra hops, and it was one of the first triple IPAs I ever had. And I was hooked. I was also really enamored by the nature-inspired can art by Wolf Skull Jack. That was when I started carefully peeling labels from cans and affixing them to sheets of paper or cardboard because the art was so amazing. I've had over 80 beers from Anchorage over the years. Thankfully, my favorite bottle shop, Harvest in Holland, Ohio, is one of the few places that actually carry Anchorage Brewing. I can always count on a well-crafted beer from Gabe and his crew. Now, if I can only get him on the podcast. The third brewery, representing the regional favorite, would be a tie between Founders Brewing and Bell's Brewing. These two were always some of the most accessible beers in the tri-state area. I look back and I have had slightly more beers from Founders, but it is still too close to call. Remember, I grew up in Michigan, so friends and family alike familiar with them had nothing but good things to say. The first time I tried beers from those two was 10 years ago. Founders Porter and Bell's Expedition Stout were the first entries. I know that they're not really as craft as they used to be, but they still represent a significant part of my beer journey. And if you go to either of their tap rooms today, you can always find some really nice taproom-only options. One other cool thing is that Bell's also has a pretty well-stocked homebrew store inside their general store that I've used a time or two. The fourth brewery, representing the big beer, would be Adroit Theory Brewing. This was another one of those breweries I had never heard of before Tavour. I took a chance on a bottle of a Belgian quad called All I See Is Carrion that had killer artwork. The beer was one of the first of that style I ever had as well. Then I discovered their hazy double IPAs, and even more can art. And then it was the triple IPAs, and even more can art. And then I discovered the Russian Imperial Stouts. Dia de los Muertos is still one of my favorites. I can honestly say that I have not had a bad beer from them, and I have had over 150 unique beers from them over the years. When I found out that I could order directly from the taproom and have it shipped to my home, this sealed the deal. I really appreciate the vision that Mark has there. He has released beers with can art inspired by Dune, Alien, The Crow, Dungeons & Dragons, G.I. Joe, and many others. So, there you have it, my Mount Beermore. I would love for you to tell me what breweries are represented on your Mount Beermore. Leave a comment or contact me directly to let me know. You might even hear your breweries on the podcast. In this segment of Homebrew Hijinks, where I document my homebrew adventures, I kick off the mash with my Saison, A Ray of Sunshine. I would stay true to style and keep the grain bill pretty straightforward. I used 73% American Pilsner, 17% American wheat, and 10% Cara Munich. The latter would provide a bit of body and a bit of color to the final product. I also added an ounce of rice hulls to prevent any clumping of the grain during the mash. I combined all the grain into my brew bag and began to heat up the 1 gallon of strike water. This would be a 60-minute mash at 148 Fahrenheit, slightly lower than my typical mash. From what I read, this temperature would provide a slightly drier finish. So once my water got up to the 160 degree Fahrenheit strike temperature, I placed my brew bag inside the pasta pot. I took my metal spoon and stirred all the grain to make sure everything was wet. I took an initial reading with my initial read thermometer, and it was 148 degrees Fahrenheit, right on target. I put the cover on the pot and placed it in my oven, which was set to its lowest setting, 170 degrees Fahrenheit. I checked the grain every 15 minutes to be sure I was at my target temperature with the door cracked as needed. At the end of the 60 minutes, it was time to sparge the grain. Just as a reminder, this is simply a rinsing of the grain in order to gather as much of the sugary goodness the yeast would feast on. During the mash, I heated 2 pots of water to 164 degrees Fahrenheit. I used a 2-cup measure and slowly poured the sparge water over the grain to begin the process. I also would squeeze the grain after every couple of rinses, again to maximize the sugar for the wort that I was preparing. Keep in mind that at this temperature, I was very happy to have brewer's gloves that protected me a little bit because that grain is hot. I used 2.5 quarts of water to reach my goal of 1.6 gallons of wort. The pre-boil gravity was supposed to be 1035. My measurement at 145 degrees Fahrenheit was 1023. With temperature correction, this put me at 1038, which meant my ABV would be slightly higher at the end of the day, though still within specs for the style. I was happy that I was on track with my numbers. Next episode, I turn up the heat on the project. Now, it's time for Barstool Banter. In this episode, I stir the pot with Brit Schlechter from Wyrd Sisters Taphouse and Brewery in North Charleston, South Carolina. We shift our discussion to building community through beer, how not to brew styles according to BJCP, a bit more of her origin story, and dive deeper into her approach to flavors and brewing beer. My wife and I honeymooned in Charleston many moons ago. We stayed on the south side of town. There's so much history in Charleston, which is really cool. So what is your favorite part about having your business there in Charleston?
So my favorite part about Charleston, honestly, now, especially because we're not really in the historic district, isn't really about the history. It's about the melting pot. It's about all kinds of people from all different places, from all lifestyles. They're kind of all in the same place. It's just really cool to see how everyone fits together and makes it work, and getting to hear the stories from, just like comparing life from California to New York to Florida, even from overseas. There's a lot of people here from overseas as well, especially because it's a big like DOD town. So I just think it's really neat to see like everyone coming together from all these different places and having great conversations. And like, that's why I love being in this town. There's other cities that you get that in, but this is the one that I have felt where everyone's the most comfortable with it, where it just happens. We bring in a tap from New York and someone will come in and be like, "Oh, I've been there. I'm from New York." And then the person sitting next to them will be like, "I've had that beer too, but have you had this beer from this brewery, like across the world?" And they're like, "No, I haven't." Next thing you know, they're like trying to figure out where they can find it. And I just think it's great that everyone just fits so nicely together into this little melting pot that we have here.
And it's fun how beer brings us together as well and helps us find some of that commonality also. Because I usually sit at the bar as well. I just really love that part of it. And it sounds like what you've tried to do intentionally is really working out and actually happening, which is pretty cool.
It's fun to watch. It's fun to see for sure.
Yeah.
It's fun to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned so much about beer. Like, I thought I knew a lot. And just talking to them, I've learned so much more. And it's amazing.
Clearly, you started out as a home brewer.
Well, I've been in breweries for over 10 years now. I worked at a brewery in Maryland for 4.5 years before I moved down here. And then before we opened this one, I was at a different brewery for 4 years. So though in Maryland, I didn't brew, I would have to say that the brewer there was probably the best teacher I could have had. He was adamant that the front of the house staff knew everything about the beers that he was making. And as the taproom manager, he would sit down and basically have a class with me so that I could then share that with my employees in a way that made sense to them. So I was like forced to learn, but loved every second of it. So then I really got into, all right, well, now I know all of this. And then I would just annoy the crap out of him pretty much with even more questions So when I came down here, I did get into the brewing side of things at the last brewery that I was at here. But I wanted to learn how to do things on my own as well.
Mm-hmm.
Beer is not like, yes, there's definitely like a process that you have to follow for sure. But what makes it so special is that every brewer has their own technique and their own style, and that changes everything. And I wanted to learn that for myself, what my style was before we actually opened the brewery.
So I like that. So your origin story, really, you start out learning as much as you can about beer, working the front, understanding the service side of it, understanding the consumer side of it, and then you move into a role where were you actually assisting with the brewing then at the previous brewery?
Yes.
So you did do some commercial brewing then, and then you kind of took a step back then, is what I'm hearing. And you said, okay, let's do some home brewing together, Thad, and let's kind of figure out what we want to do. Let's kind of figure out how this stuff really works and how it really has our fingerprints upon it. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing here.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's awesome.
You know, I've been to a lot of breweries. I know a lot of brewers. Just being in the industry for so long now, you just meet everybody. And it was fun to watch everyone like put their own twist on things, how they develop recipes, how they do things. And I also come from a culinary background. So my brain didn't really understand why they did it the way that they did. In my experience, they're like, okay, we need an IPA. So they write a recipe and they brew an IPA. That works. Not for me. That's not how we do things. We go, I want a beer that tastes like this. How do I get there? How do I get this final flavor profile that we're looking for? And it might turn out to be an IPA. It might not in any fashion. We don't focus on style. Like our slogan, I guess, that when people ask us about it, we tell them we're flavor first, style maybe. We've had to make up a few since we've opened because I make these beers and I'm like, well, what do we call it? And we both just stared at each other and we're like, we don't know. You know, you go to the book trying to figure out what style guidelines it kind of falls in, and it doesn't. They break all the rules. So it's been a lot of fun. And I think that's where my culinary background really comes in because that's how I develop recipes too. You know, it's like, yeah, you can walk in going like, I'm going to make chicken Alfredo. How do I do that? But someone else has already done that. But if you go in and you're like, all right, I want this creamy chicken with lemon and this flavor, you build something else. You build something new. And that's how I approach our beers.
Seriously, Brit, it's totally throwing brewing on its ear. I mean, it's my mind is blown just hearing you describe that, because I entered my first homebrew contest last fall, and I poured and poured and poured through like the BJCP guidelines, because what I brewed didn't end up being exactly what I was aiming for, and so I was like, well, what else can it be? So I had to kind of shift to a different category to make it work. I mean, you just basically saying BJCP, it's cool, and yeah, okay, it's all right, but I'm going to throw it out the window. I'm just going to brew tasty beer and leave it at that. I mean, it's kind of what I'm hearing.
No, that's exactly what you should be hearing. We had a bunch of people ask us this year if we were going to enter GABF or World Beer Cup or something. I was like, I mean, I would love to do that one day just to see what happens.
Yeah.
We'll have to see how many experimental categories they add, because I literally can't send beer and expect to win, because there's going to be some part of it that does not follow the guidelines and it doesn't follow the rules. So like even when we were in the homebrew competitions, we only took home one judge's award, but we won People's Choice at every one we were at.
That says a lot.
But I mean, that meant so much more to us than winning by the judges did. But even the one that we won with the judges, I put kale in a goza. Our inspiration was summer flavors. So we were like, all right, well, what about like that kale salad that you get that's just kale and lemon juice and salt, and you put it out at like your picnics and stuff. How do I make that into a beer? Goza. Duh,
exactly. Yeah.
So then it's like, I'm on Reddit and I'm going through it. I'm like talking to other brewers and stuff. And I'm like, all right, guys, like how much kale should I add? Like, has anyone done this before? And they're like, no, you're crazy. Why are you doing that? And I'm like, well, because that's what I want to do. And they're like, well, you can probably like, just hop it and like more bitter hop it, and you can get that like earthy flavor. And I'm like, I don't want an earthy flavor. I want it to taste like kale. Like there's a difference.
What did you end up doing then?
For the 10-gallon batch, it got a pound of kale at 60 minutes. And I just tasted it every 15 minutes to see what was happening. And about halfway through, I was like, I just don't think we're going to get enough. So luckily I bought extra. So I added another pound and it turned out amazing. It's nice and lemony because when you cook, like, when you crush kale, it gives you a nice lemon flavor. And obviously added some lemon peel to accentuate that because in the salad you would use like a lemon dressing or just lemon juice.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely wanted that flavor, but it gives you that nice earthiness. Like there's no mistaking it. It's kale, but somehow it is also light and refreshing, and people loved it. We won People's Choice and the Judges Award for that one.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's really neat.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask a question, but probably no answer to it. Do you have a core rotation of beers on tap usually?
No, absolutely not. And I don't ever plan on having one.
Okay.
My long-term plan, I don't want to do it this year. I probably won't even do it next year because I really want to feel out our customers and see what they're enjoying, what they're willing to try, how far I can actually push it more often. I will do more like repeated seasonals.
Okay.
So we have a beer that's actually on tap right now called Chocolate Covered Middle Finger. It's a chocolate malt and vanilla porter where I actually take some of the spent grain and add it in a bag into like the last 15 minutes of the boil to try to pull out just a little bit more malt character than just from your typical mash. So I almost like wet hop with spent grain. I don't actually know if it does anything, but
it
I did
sounds
it
cool.
the first time, so I had to do it the second time. Now I just don't know. It sits on cocoa nibs and vanilla beans for 3 weeks. It's probably one of the more traditional beers that we make, but it doesn't end up tasting like your traditional porter, especially once you start using the words like chocolate and vanilla. It's not sweet. It is dark chocolate, and the vanilla beans aren't there to make it more sweet like milk chocolate. It's there to make it taste more like actual dark chocolate and not like cooking chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's crushable for sure because it's, you finish the first one, you're like, oh, I just feel like I ate a piece of cake. You're like, oh, that was delicious.
I want another piece.
Yeah, give me another piece of cake, please. But we do it every year for Halloween. So like you'll see certain things like that. Certain times of the year, you'll see a beer come out that you are familiar with that probably came out the year before and the year before that. But even then, if we come up with something new and that one seems to be approached better and people are enjoying it more, the seasonal might get replaced every year and you might see something new instead. Beer is ever changing. Why shouldn't our menus be?
I like that. I'm going to have to write that down.
I should probably write it down so we can use it.
Anyway, how many taps do you have there then at Wyrd Sisters?
So we have 14 taps.
Okay.
Typically, when you come in, you'll only see 2 or 3 of ours at a time.
So you mentioned New York. Where else do you get beer from for your guest taps? You specific, or do you have specific breweries that you're looking at that you try to bring in, or ones that align with kind of your weirdness, so to speak?
So yes and no.
Okay.
There are a few breweries that I know push the limits. So I do look for them first, for sure, when I'm going through the list. Especially with the type of clientele that we have, I look for feedback as well, especially with people that are from different states. They'll be like, oh my God, this was my favorite brewery in California. And if I can get it, I will try. But really, it just comes down to, do I know the brewery, at least by reputation? Do I know that they're going to consistently put out a quality beer? Not all of them are going to be killer, especially if they're taking chances. But if over the grand scheme of things, I know that they're consistent and they do a good job and they care about what the product that they're putting out, I'll carry them. But we've carried beer from pretty much everywhere. We've had beer and we try to have it as often as possible, but like from Estonia, we had a True Fest beer that I got shipped over from Germany this year. We've carried Japanese beer that's actually brewed in Brazil. But yeah, if I think it's a good beer, we'll carry it. We focus really hard on trying to make sure we don't carry anything that is easily accessible in Charleston. You shouldn't be able to leave our building and go anywhere else in the neighborhood that we're in and get it at any other bar. You might see the same brewery, but you're not going to see the same beer that we actually had.
We were talking about this before the show. I might ask about getting some beer sent, and I found that you're a Pico brewery, which is a step less than a nano brewery. I've never had somebody that owns a Pico brewery, so can you give me a little bit more insight as to what that really means?
Yeah, it means at the end of the day, we brew less than 50 barrels a year. I think it's 50 or 100 is like what the number is. But we brew 10 gallons of beer at a time. So to put it in a way that people who don't know how big like sixtels are, we get 2 sixtels out of it, but it's like 80 pints. If you're lucky.
Okay.
You know, once you start adding hops and you add fruit and stuff, like even though you brew 10 gallons, you might not get 10 gallons at the end of it. So it's super limited and it doesn't last. We did just get 2 1-barrel tanks. So hopefully some of our beers stick around a little bit longer, but you're still only 3 times as much. It's still really not that much in the grand scheme of things. So it's fun, but that's why you get a new beer almost every week. That's why we have as many regulars as we do, because you have to come in every week or you're probably going to miss it and we're not going to have it anymore, especially if it comes out for an event. I just did a pineapple soft serve pale ale last weekend. It sold out in 6 hours.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
It was amazing.
Sounds amazing.
It's my new favorite toy. Soft serve ice cream mix. It's non-dairy. You can use it like lactose. And then I found out it comes in a bunch of different flavors. So
Well,
I've had a lot of fun lately.
That's fantastic. I mean, again, just that creative spark that comes out. I mean, that's fun. And for those that can't have lactose, I mean.
Yeah, right? I try really hard to keep everything as allergen-free as possible. Obviously, there are certain styles, if I'm going for that style, that require lactose. And putting ice cream mix in instead will not solve that problem. So, maltodextrin is a great substitute for most, but not for everything. I can't make a milk stout and not actually put lactose in it. It would affect the final product of the beer.
Right.
I'm gonna try for sure, and I'm just gonna call it a not milk stout. See what happens.
Last call.
It's nearly time to wrap things up, but first, one more for the road. This episode, I'm drinking One Big Moose from Fierce Beer out of Aberdeen, Scotland. From the brewer, the original Very Big Moose. If you're checking in a newer one, we have annual updates. Please check them out. An imperial chocolate stout made with the best Colombian cacao, Madagascan vanilla, and a touch of cinnamon. First brewed for Collab Fest 2017 with Brewdog Aberdeen staff, it has become our signature beer. Without further delay, so this is a 12.5% ABV bourbon barrel-aged imperial stout. I received this in a beer mail from one of my beer skis, my other brother Daryl, after his recent visit to the motherland. Man, I need to get there someday and experience the beer for myself. The can is simple. A silhouette of a moose with the logo superimposed, with a bit more information on the label gushing about the beer. So it says, many editions of our velvet smooth imperial stout, Very Big Moose, have been brewed and barreled over the years. This is the one we can't stop coming back to. Our signature VBM recipe, packed with cacao and vanilla, bringing flavors of chocolate ganache and rich espresso. Maturation in bourbon casks adds complexity with notes of toasted oak and burnt sugar. So it also notes here that it was bourbon barrel aged in a whiskey barrel for 6 months. This is a little bit smaller can, 330 milliliters. It says small batch vegan beer. Okay, so I poured this out into a snifter glass, let it warm up just a shade. It poured a very deep, dark color with a kind of a viscosity to it, right? So it's a 12.5. It's a big beer. So on the nose, just a hint of bourbon. Maybe a little bit of that burnt caramel in there. And just a hint of chocolate kind of underneath. First sip impression. So this is so smooth and decadent. It does come as a bourbon forward beer. So that bourbon flavor hits right from the start, but it gently fades into a dark chocolate like ganache as they described. Maybe a little hint of sweetness, not too much. It's actually pretty well balanced as far as that goes. Sometimes these big beers can be a little cloying, or in my opinion, maybe a little bit too much bourbon. This is pretty well balanced. As mentioned, it's really smooth. It's not overly bitter. It does have, again, kind of that dark chocolate bitterness underneath, but it's not overly so. I really appreciate the thought and the effort that goes into this. I really appreciate my friend Daryl bringing this back for me. It's just another great example when you go to a new region, whether it's a city, a state, or a new country, there is always good beer there to find. You just have to look for it. Again, this is a great beer. I give this one a high 4 tasters out of 5 on the flight board. Cheers, fierce beer. I'm always looking for new craft beverages to review, so if you've got one from your favorite local craft brewery, meadery, or cidery you'd like me to drink and describe, reach out and let me know. That's all for this episode of the 5 Beer Plan. With so many podcasts out there, thanks for choosing to listen to mine. Join me next time as I go back in time for another segment of Steeped in Tradition, take the next step in the homebrew project, finish up my conversation with Brit from Wyrd Sisters, and review another beer. Remember to hit the subscribe button on your preferred podcast platform to be notified of new episodes. Follow me on Instagram as well, 5 Beer Plan 2022, to see what is happening on my personal ale trail. I'd love to hear from you, and there are several ways you may do so. Leave a comment for this episode on Spotify, direct message me on Instagram, or email me directly, 5beerplan@frontier.com. Be sure to support your local breweries, choose your beers wisely, and drink them responsibly. Until next time, keep walking your ale trail and stay thirsty, my friends.